When you paint something you're passionate about, a place, a loved one, a memory, you're not just copying what you see, you're capturing what you feel. Like Van Gogh's swirling skies or Sargent's bold brushwork, passion translates through movement, color, and texture. Don't be afraid to exaggerate, to let emotion guide your choices. Whether it's the glow of a sunset or the quiet depth of a familiar face, paint it as you experience it, not just as it appears. That's how art becomes personal, powerful, and unforgettable. Welcome to this week's art vlog, where I attempt to paint this figurative work of my wife. Spoiler alert, it didn't really capture her true likeness, but maybe that's the core of this lesson. This week we're going to be talking all about passion. You ever ask yourself why certain paintings move you more so than other ones? Is it skill, maybe accuracy, or maybe color? Or is it all those things? I think it's a lot of those things combined with passion. When we paint something deeply personal, in my case, my wife, of course, a loved one, for example, a place, a memory, we have an opportunity to go beyond just capturing a likeness and instead more focus on what it truly feels to you, capturing that element of emotion. I think that three key elements that help us translate that passion onto our canvas are, as mentioned, color, texture, and movement, or energy if you want. This is, I feel, a fundamental difference between an illustrator, for example, and an artist. Illustrators are after obviously accuracy and a direct representation, whereas artists are after a powerful expression of their experience. But before I get too ahead of myself talking about some of these concepts for this week, I am aware that a lot of viewers here are brand new to my channel, and I want to welcome them, of course, and I have to mention a bit about my process of paint application and some of my materials, all of which are always down in the description of the video for reference for everybody here. Firstly, welcome if you're brand new. On here we teach all sorts of different things, mostly intuitive art, all the little nuances of art mark making that I've learned over 25 plus years of working professionally. So this particular portrait is one of, I would say, a series of 10 or 15 that I've done here for YouTube since we've started back in November, and is very similar in fact to some of the ones I've done lately using oil paints and cold wax and these tools that you see me using here. So this is a brass squeegee. I've used a silicone catalyst silicone brush already in this video, and I will be for the remainder of this video. And I have been using brushes. I do use some later on. Point is that I use all sorts of different tools to get the desired organic look and feel of the paintings here. So this video is no different. I am using a cold wax again. For a lot of you that are returning to my channel, welcome as well. I'm using cold wax here for this particular figurative work. Even though I do discuss some of the concepts of color and edges in this video doesn't really go into depth of those ideas. I will link alongside all the reference and resource info down below some of the videos from previous weeks that go much more into depth. So if that's of interest to you, I do recommend watching that. Now on to this week's figurative work of my wife. So I've been meaning to paint her in this similar setting for a while now. I had this idea in my head of having her in this pasture-like setting, reminiscent of our sort of hometown where we grew up. I grew up just off the Adriatic coast in Croatia, and most of what you see around her, if not all of it, is entirely intuitive. It's just entirely from memory, combination of childhood memory, recent memory, memories we share together. And I wanted to sort of place her free flowing in this similar setting. Now, what I'm showing on the top right there is a photo reference that I used for this painting. As you can see, it matches the finished work below, not at all in any sense of the word, except her posture and the way she's turning. Now, I do apologize for blurring out the photo. I was under strict instructions to do that, but I think you get an idea as to what I was working off of. I am working and using that photo really strictly for some of the details in her gown and some of the lights that are falling across her skin. But for the most part, as I said, the posture and everything around her really is from certain intuition, experiences, and so on. Really, this painting started out as a basic no-tan drawing where you have darks around her, i.e. the pasture land, and of course the darkest dark, her hair, sort of being simplified. They're in simple shapes. The background, the sky, is one big plane, and of course her dress, which is highly stylized, is front and highest value. It's the lightest light of the painting, and it pops out against the darker pasture. Speaking of the gown, brings me to my first point on how to create energy in your subject, and that is through movement or energy, or what we artists call edges. Movement in a painting can convey certain dynamic nature of memories and emotions. So, I don't know, as an example, loose, flowing brush strokes can capture this certain feeling of fleeting moments or transient nature of a memory. Impressionists did this when painting light and atmosphere, for example. The way that I achieve some of these transient or loose or disappearing edges is exactly as I'm doing right there with this squeegee brush. And not only with the squeegee brush, I do this exact thing with most of my tools, in that, paint gets applied, and then as you can see it there, I'm dragging that squeegee down just to knock back a lot of those hard edges, and also just to lessen the texture quality in these initial stages of that pasture. You can see there with the knife as well, I'm drawing in as well, I'm knocking back some of those edges, I'm loosening up and creating a sense of mood with what's left over with these dynamic marks. Now, her gown that I mentioned is very abstract in nature, somewhat flat. It does have some indication of light direction, but it's relatively flat, and it's really the mystery of this painting. It elicits emotion, I think, from a distance, intrigue, mystery, and it was done obviously strategically like that. Let me know what you think about these abstract cues of paintings. I gravitate towards doing them quite often. I mean, obviously my work is, a balance of representational and abstract, but every now and again I really push it in the abstract sphere and stylize a lot of, in particularly, gestures from models that I work with. So, I'm keen on hearing what your thoughts are on these sorts of things, and whether you use it for your own work. And yeah. Beyond just using soft edges for this transient feel to a painting, if you are more keen on using hard edges, which I do use very strategically, of course, but hard edges often evoke a sense of clarity, structure, I guess, and boldness within the scope of history. You have obviously your photorealists and to some extent cubism, and futurism. Painters like Picasso and Braque use hard edges to fragment and maybe reconstruct reality in a way that feels dynamic and analytical to them. So, for your own work, you can certainly entertain that notion of thinking where hard edges symbolize strength, maybe industry or forward momentum in some sense. And this certainly does have a great deal of energy and passion that's associated with it. As I'm zoomed in for this part of the painting process, you can quite clearly see all of the abstract marks that are defining that background, the pasture, that will be more refined as we go along. And now I'm starting to apply what I call color notes to her face. So each one is obviously very calculated as to where it's going. Each one is meticulously applied based on obviously the drawing and the color temperature, color value. But this brings me to my second point of emotion in your subject, and of course that is color. And I think color is one of the most powerful tools in expressing emotion. When painting something deeply personal, I think we need to think beyond realism and consider how colors feel. That sounds very deep, even though I don't mean to be. You know, you could look at it from a childhood, for example. Your childhood home might not just be brown or green. It might be warm, golden hues evoking nostalgia, and so on. Similarly, when rendering skin tone of a loved one, or in my case, my wife, you can certainly use rich, vibrant tones to evoke a certain energy and richness. You know, Matisse used bold colors, for example, to express exactly that life and energy in his portrait work. If alternately a memory that you have is somewhat bittersweet or whatever, more softer or muted colors or limited palette might better reflect that emotion. So color definitely plays a vital role in evoking emotion, energy, passion in your work, and it should be considered strategically when approaching or starting a painting. Now on to the dress, which ended up being the defining component of this painting. I know that for the dress, I'm keeping things relatively simple. It will be virtually unrendered. It will be just a single plane and high key. It will stick out against that background. That's my goal all along, it was. But it will definitely have texture. So it won't have chroma, but it will certainly have texture. And that brings me to my third point, and that's texture. And how does texture impact passion and emotion and presence of a subject? So, texture brings obviously depth and physicality to a painting, making it, of course, feel more alive and in front of you. A rough impasto approach, which I have a tendency to do for a lot of my work, as some of you already know. So impasto approach, like Van Gogh's, for example, expressive brush strokes, can evoke raw emotion in a memory. You can see as I come in close to paint that design on the front of her dress, that's just a visual cue I wanted to add. You can quite clearly see the sculptural qualities of the brush marks on her dress, and furthermore on her neck and arm, whereas to the left of her, the pasture is relatively flat. I will be adding thicker strokes, in fact, in a minute or so, of the flowers, so they will also have, thicker components to them. But texture essentially fundamentally has a certain presence, three-dimensional presence that you can't attain with a flat wash. Here, as indicated, I'm painting a place that's fictitious from intuition, but nonetheless it holds certain personal meaning. And Texture essentially plays a role in that it mimics the essence of that memory. As I put in texture on the flowers in the front, I'm placing them strategically to play off of the model's stress and the overall design of the painting. Hopefully you enjoyed this short demo using my intuitive, reactive, process-based approach to painting. As we get closer to this finished portrait of my wife, maybe from 15 years ago or so, I want you to pay attention to all the sculptural qualities of the brush marks, the knife marks, the color, the motion, the movement, the energy, the passion that went into painting it, and hopefully that's how it resonates with you. Let me know if I've skipped over something, if you have a question or two or picked up a trick or two. I certainly enjoyed the back and forth that YouTube affords us. For now, thank you very much for watching. I will see you hopefully next week in the next video lesson. Bye bye.